But my philosophy, even though I'm known as paleo chef, is paleo. What works for me
Paleo, I love that.
may not work for you, and what works today may not work in 6 months. And so even if you find a diet that is working great for you now, you're going to evolve. You might change environments, and that's going to cause you to evolve. And it is a moving target.
There's something about Mary.
There's a lot of things about Mary. I'm sorry.
Of course, we're going to get into it
Yeah.
all. The first thing I want to ask you about, of course, your client base is some of the most absolutely exceptional athletes on the planet, and people we see on the big screen. You know, some of the stuff you get to share with me personally.
Right.
But we have this concept in our culture, like there's this glorified diet that if everybody can just get this particular diet, everybody's going to be set. So with you working with all these incredible people over the years, and also just everyday folks, is there a one-size-fits-all diet for everybody?
You wish, right? It would just be so simple, but it is really diverse. So with my clients, every single one of them is different, and it's all based on their body chemistry. We're doing tons of comprehensive testing and finding what works for them. And it gets really detailed because some of these people are elite level athletes. But my philosophy, even though I'm known as paleo chef, is paleo. What works for me
Paleo, I love that.
may not work for you, and what works today may not work in 6 months. And so even if you find a diet that is working great for you now, you're going to evolve. You might change environments, and that's going to cause you to evolve. And it is a moving target, which the more time you spend understanding your body and your body's chemistry and the way your body is going to react to foods, the easier it is going to be for you to understand when you need to pivot. But the idea that one size fits all is false. And I do say, you know, if you have somebody who is preaching this one diet, this one modality, run.
Right. This is one of the things that I saw and I connected with you on early on, was you seeing that, because most folks believe that their thing is the thing. And I think we all can be guilty of that at some point, especially if something has helped us so much.
Sure.
We want to tell the whole world about that thing. But getting to a place where you understand, and there's this term that I'm grateful is starting to integrate our culture, which is, you know, metabolic individuality.
Right.
Right. And so you using that in your practice, paying attention to the person, and not just my thing is going to be your thing.
Right.
But you do, of course, have some really important principles. And I think your principles evolved because of what you went through yourself. And if you could, let's talk a little bit about that, because you struggled for years with some particular health issues that, and I want to talk about two parts of it. Let's talk about the story and how it was kind of written off for so long as being something that was psychosomatic.
Right. I started getting really bad migraines in 2nd grade, and just continue that through grade school, junior high, high school, and into my 20s. Migraines that would turn into hives, hormone issues. You start going to the doctor at a young age, and they prescribe you things that don't make sense. And like at one point I came home from the doctor and I looked up the medication they gave me. It was antipsychotics. And I was like, what is this for? I don't understand how this helps my migraines. And like, oh, I just thought maybe it was depression or psychosomatic. And you're feeling really betrayed. And you go through pain for that long. And I've photos on my Instagram of like the types of hives and the swollenness of my stomach. But you're in pain so much, and I'm a really active kid, that you come to terms with it where you're like, this is just going to be my normal. And you're going to, I actually had a moment where I like spoke to God. I'm like, look, if this is going to be my normal, if I'm going to be in pain every day, please just make sure someone somewhere else is suffering less. Like I had to like make sense of it in that way. And I'd be in the ER at least once a month, because I would be vomiting to the point where I would black out, and then somebody would find me, and then I'd be rushed to the hospital. When you're young and they find you like that, they assume you overdosed on drugs. So they're yelling at you, calling you a liar, like you have to tell us what you took. And you're like, I swear it's just a horrible migraine. And it's frustrating because you feel betrayed by doctors, you feel betrayed by Western medicine, and then you don't get to have a good quality of life. And a couple of the stories I share is, you know, I dropped out of high school as a junior, went straight into corporate technology, and so I'm the youngest. by 10, 15 years, which means I can't perform at their level. I have to perform above their level to justify my role, because they're looking for that one mistake you're going to make. And I have migraines, so I'm sitting at my desk with sunglasses because I don't want to go home, because I don't want them to think that I can't cut it. And then when you're a girl, they're like, oh, did a boy break up with you? And you're like, I knew my head hurts so much right now. Or like when I played basketball, the migraines would affect my eyesight. I had a coach that was really understanding of that, and she knew I loved to play. So she would time when she would put me in the game, I would have a head wrap on, and that would give me pressure so I could see. And I would tap her, would take the headband off, I'd go in, do a couple of plays, look at her. She'd sub me out because she knew that I was about to lose sight again. So you're making all these modifications to still live a life. And it wasn't until my last ER visit at 24 or 25 where they give you morphine and some other medications via IV, and they don't actually help the migraine, they just knock you out. But there's side effects to that, and it creates this massive anxiety in my body, and I'm starting to have a panic attack. I'm like, you know what? I want to understand what is causing my migraine. And now I'm starting to be as type A in that moment as I am everywhere else in my life. And it was very dramatic. I like ripped the IV out of my arm. I'm like, screw this. I'm out of here. I'm going to figure this out on my own. And then I started to do a deeper dive into understanding the mechanism of a migraine. All right, what's happening to my vessels? Okay, what happens on this cellular level? Okay, the mitochondria. Then I remember a report I did on the mitochondria in high school. Well, my partner and I rewrote the lyrics to a Beastie Boys song around the mitochondria. You got to fight for your right to ATP, man.
Oh my God.
And so it's like, whoa, I had the answers. And then in junior high, I had done a paper on how I believed ADHD and autism was autoimmune related. And I did a prototype of a bar that had nutrient. And it's like, Mary, you've been sitting on this for a while. And I found the TED Talk by Dr. Terry Walls. And that was my gateway into like, okay, I'm just going to change the way that I eat. And then I did labs that were out of pocket because they weren't covered by my insurance to test for autoimmune. And while my blood tests that the doctors had given me were saying I wasn't celiac, the cheek swab and the stool test definitively said you carry both genes. So I was pumped. I was like, okay, I just don't eat these foods. And 3 months later, every pain in my body, including the headaches, were gone. I woke up without a headache and I thought I was dead. I was like, wait, this feels like a trick. And it was confusing. I actually shook my head around, waiting for the familiar pain to come back, and it didn't. And that I rode with that for 6 or 7 months. And then that was sort of the beginning of leaving tech and then doing what I'm doing, investigating with athletes and entertainers and finding what's going to make them optimal.
Wow, this is so remarkable. I haven't heard anybody else to articulate some of these things that I've seen firsthand as well. Like when the thing is gone, you kind of look for it. Like, where's that pain that I was having? Like, trying to find, and also there might be some fear tied there too, that I'll find it again.
Yeah.
And so you got to learn how to live your life without it. Like you said, you woke up, you're like, is this heaven? Like what's going on here?
I mean, that ties in other things. Like when we're so used to something, even if it's not good for us, and then it's not there, why are you looking for it still? That's a whole other conversation. But it's like, yeah, like, wait, don't come back. And then there's the fear of it coming back. Like, what do I eat that day? What if I eat that and it comes back? That type of thing. But it's much deeper. And yeah, I've always been somewhat aware of that side of things.
Yeah. And you were really a good canvas for this because, like you said, you're type A in all these other areas of your life, but you would kind of outsource this part having to do with your health and your internal landscape out to other people who are not just telling you that they can't really do anything about it necessarily, but even kind of downplaying it and telling you essentially this was all in your head. How frustrating was that?
Incredibly frustrating, because you're telling them this is how I feel, this is what's going on. They're like, no, you're not. And I'm like, bro, I've been in this body for 25 years, 37 now, 25 years. But for you to tell me based off of a couple of appointments what's going on doesn't make sense. And it's where I built around the idea that when I'm seeking out a professional or seeking out colleagues, now when I'm working with my athletes and we have an anomaly, I'm not looking for the smartest person in the room. I'm looking for the most curious person in the room. I make a living on saying, I don't know, but we're going to figure this out. When someone says, I know definitively, I'm like, peace.
Run.
Yes.
Dun, 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 dun. So, again, like I mentioned, you were a good canvas for it because that personality type that you carry, where you're going to be more inquisitive, where you're going to be more driven to figure things out, you had to go through that so you understand what other people are dealing with. And for you to even say when you were dealing with that, you were hoping somebody else, at least there was some kind of an outlet where this pain you're experiencing, someone else is experiencing something less somehow because of it or related to it. You created a context, where that was still acceptable when in reality, what you were going through, it didn't have to be. It never did. But this brought you to the life that you have today where you've impacted so many people. And it's really remarkable. But I want to circle back to that TED Talk showing up as well with Terry Walls. We had her on, it was years ago now.
She is the queen.
Yeah, she's a boss for sure.
Her son is a boss too. Like, that's just queen.
We'll put that episode for everybody in the show notes as well, Dr. Terry Walls. But this brought you into this domain of understanding the connection because again, this is something you're experiencing upstairs, right? Your head, you've got these migraines, but not really seeing the connection up until closer to that point of something happening with your gut, right? So let's talk about that connection because I think a lot of folks today, we've got like about 70 million Americans have digestive diseases, and we tend to think it's just if something is wrong with our belly, right? If you've got a belly ache or something, some offshoot of that, or maybe IBS, but you might have gut issues and it's affecting your skin, for example, or your migraines.
Your mood, the way you show up in relationships, your emotional responses to things, the rash on your knee, the cracking of your joints, your arthritis, almost all, I don't want to say everything, but a lot of things can tie back to that. And then sometimes your emotional state can impact your gut, and then that impacts your symptoms that your body's presenting. So it is always connected. It's like when I'm talking to any client, I go, I want to know how you're feeling head to toe. Because something you may not think is related could be related. And I'm usually heartbroken when someone tells me, oh yeah, I just have IBS. I've had it for 10 years. I'm like, you don't just have, it's not a diagnosis, it's a symptom. And so trying to get people to understand a lot of what you've been diagnosed with is actually a symptom, and we can make that symptom potentially go away through some time, patience, and testing.
So 2 things here. Number 1, I love that you mentioned this being a symptom because we tend to, again, our identity, especially if we dealt with something for a long time, it becomes our identity, So I am diabetic, instead of understanding it's a condition. And your condition, your diabetes, is not like anybody else's diabetes who's ever existed on planet Earth and never will exist, anybody in the future as well, because we're all so unique. It's a category of symptoms and you get a blanket label when your body is very different. So that's number 1. And number 2, if you could articulate a little more, let's dig in here. How was your gut health or lack thereof causing issues with migraines for you?
So I have celiac disease, so I can't process the protein gluten. And so in lamest terms, I eat that. It causes massive inflammation because I can't break it down. And it causes all these little microscopic holes. People know this is leaky gut. And then I'm being malnourished because I can't actually absorb the nutrients from good foods. So no matter what I was trying to add to my diet, because I wasn't removing a culprit, I was sort of doing myself a huge disservice. And that was then creating this, I know inflammation now is like a catch-all phrase, but it's causing this widespread inflammation. And so something I don't usually talk about because I don't want them to think it's weight loss, but I lost like 25, 30 pounds also. And it wasn't weight. It was just widespread inflammation my body was holding on to. And it was the hives, the headaches. So now if I get glutened by accident, within 20 minutes, that cycle starts all over again. And if someone has an autoimmune disease related to something like gluten, which they don't know, and this may have changed, but the last time I was looking at how long it takes for that repair or for that damage to repair, from the last time you eat gluten, it takes up to 2 years for the host of damage in your body to repair. So when someone's like, oh, I just had a little bit of gluten, and I'm like, you just started the clock all over again, because your body has to repair multiple functions over the course of time from something that you were putting in your body consistently.
So this helps to bring the distinction between an autoimmune condition that can be exacerbated by interacting with gluten, well, will be, versus somebody having a sensitivity to it. Is that accurate?
It is. I haven't done a deeper dive in the sensitivity aspect of like how long it takes for that damage to repair. In general, when I'm working with clients, I'm looking at inflammatory markers, and we're just removing all the known culprits, and then any of the nuanced culprit, like if they have cantaloupe, for example, or lemon, remove that. And because what I'm doing is so like in the moment with the athlete, get them going. I haven't done a deeper dive in if you're sensitive, if a little bit's okay. Because people do say a little bit's okay, whereas my reaction to that is if your body is telling you, I don't like this, I don't think you should have it. But if it's like I'm on vacation and I want to enjoy something, I also want people to enjoy their lives. I guess it's like, what is it impacting when it comes to sensitivity? What's your thought on that?
I mean, some of the best data we have, there's this zonulin, this there's this chemical cascade that takes place whenever we eat any food. But there are specific mechanisms that take place in the human body when interacting with this wheat-related protein. It can be in other foods as well.
Like casein and all those other things that come up.
Yeah. And so zonulin is this, it incites the separation of the lining of our gut, right? And it's kind of this really remarkable, I like to think of this like a netting, but it would be more akin to like, you played tennis, like the racket size of a net, right? Where certain things, very specific things, are able to move from the external aspect of the gut into your circulation. But this compound, zonulin, can make that go from a tennis racket scale to the tennis net scale. Right? Where things are now getting into circulation that aren't supposed to be there. And the vast majority of folks tested have that interaction take place to some degree. Right? But it could be so minuscule that you never notice and it's not a big deal. But this also leans into the conversation about what we're actually eating today versus what our ancestors might have had. Because it's not just the wheat for most people. It's the glyphosate. It's the fact that it's this genetically modified dwarf wheat that human DNA has never really interacted with. And the fact that it's in everything, So we got to put everything in context for us. And I love that you said that. Just like, it's not about, unless you have a condition where this is straight up damaging you. It's not about being neurotic or anything like that. You can still live your life and, not be afraid to get weeded. Is that what you said earlier? Gluten.
But it's more of like when you talk about the netting, to use your analogy, it's what I'm not clear on is, so if somebody's sensitive and that netting expands, how long does it take for someone who's sensitive for it to come back down versus someone who has celiac, where it's like, oh, we're just stuck here for a little while. And that's why I'm even imagine with someone who's sensitive, the sensitivities are going to vary based on the person.
Absolutely.
And that's why Paleo.
I love that so much. So to take this a step further, there can be, obviously, for folks as they're trying to dial in what's best for them in their particular diet. And again, you've worked with all these amazing people over the years. Do you like to take the approach of like just doing a general kind of avoidance of certain foods to get started and then integrating things as you go along? Because you've got this wonderful reset program, and I want to talk about that because you don't necessarily jive with, and I said jive because also you like jazz. See, I know all these little things about you, but
jazz, baseball, and hip hop.
I mean, that's Mary in a nutshell. But understanding that, these terms have been a little bit twisted in our culture now. Detox, for example. And so you have a gut reset protocol. Let's talk about the distinction here. And then also going into a gut reset for somebody to actually heal their
Yeah.
gastrointestinal tract and their
So
gut.
the gut reset is the first time I'd ever shared a private protocol with my clients, with the public. Um, and it was scary to share. Like, you want me to work with the goat one-on-one? No problem. You want me to send something to the general population for them to do by themselves? I was terrified. But so far, so great, the stories that I'm getting from folks. But the way that I work with clients is they come to me. We're going to start to put together the map of what they should be putting in their body: food, supplementation, and then all the recovery stuff. Now, if they come to me and they are eating a standard diet or eating basically whatever they want, and I test them right away, I'm going to get a baseline of what they were eating, and we already know they're not going to be eating those things anymore. So I put them on a 1 week reset, which is a specific bone broth made with different spices from my culture, from Egypt, and then these nutrient dense foods that repeat themselves. It's 3 days of just this broth, and then 4 through 7 is these repeating foods. And different clients will experience different levels of inflammation loss. Some of it's actually quite impressive as the amount of inflammation they lose. But throughout that experience, they're having symptoms, and I have them document the whole process. Everything, whether it's bad, like I had a headache or I had a rash or this happened to my tongue, because all of that's data points. And I tell them, whether this is a breeze for you or it's uncomfortable, every piece of information that you give me is telling us a story, what we're going to tackle next. So for the general population, it has like a journal format. So you would take that to a functional medicine doctor, like, I did this reset. What happens next? Because what happens next with me one-on-one with the client is, we're like, okay, great. With all this information, now we're going to run labs after this week. And now I'm going to know clearly what your baseline is when the inflammation is gone, when you have some nutrient density in your diet. And then we build the diet from there with that information using a team. Like, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I don't feel like Julie McCoy analogy works anymore. I don't think anybody knows who Julie McCoy is. The Love Boat. She's the tour director. She tells everyone where to go and what to get. And it's kind of the role that I play.
Okay. All right. You're going to drop an analogy no one gets. I love it.
And so I work with functional medicine doctors, dietitians, food chemists, because I've built use cases over 10 years, and they're all could be considered anecdotal because they're individual. But I know what has worked and what could work if there's some anomaly. And then I use the really smart people to validate those hypotheses when I'm going to put together the program for someone. So that gut reset is the kicking off point if you are going to start a new diet or start a new performance plan or starting to investigate what's going on with your body. And then after that point, everyone likes to revisit the reset after long bouts of travel, when they're feeling a little run down, when they're feeling a little inflamed, or sometimes they're like, I just want to do like a 4-day version of it. So it's similar to like what happened with Phat Fudge. Is I put it out there, and then people are telling me how they best use it, because I have my use case. And what's been really cool is hearing a few different doctors have replaced a different reset that's a little more well known with my reset in their practice. And I was like, that's pretty badass. I feel like really humbled by that.
That's amazing.
Makes my mom happy since I'm not a doctor. She's like, oh, so you like a doctor? Sure, Mom, I'm like a doctor.
I mean, even the track that you took, like, that's not going to be culturally congruent, especially immigrant parents and the whole thing. Yeah. I know that expectation of you, moving on from high school, but of course you're clearly like, you're super intelligent. And even in that moment, I think that if I remember the story correctly, you had almost enough credits to graduate like in your junior year. Yeah. And you're like, I'm done, actually.
Yeah. High school wasn't a joyous experience for me. And the irony is I'm the first person in the whole family extended not to go to college. So it's very much the opposite immigrant story. And my parents are very academic, biochemist and engineer. And so I went in to just figure out my credits for senior year. And she was like, you just need 4 credits. Or it was like 3 or 4 credits, something like that. And I assumed it was just for my junior year. She's like, no, like, you've had honors classes, like, you're pretty much done. I'm like, y'all want me to stay here in this miserable place for another year and a half? I'm good. And I chose to drop out. I may have forged some signatures, and my parents didn't know for a little while.
First, and
I've
also,
never been defiant like that too. I was a good kid.
you got to do what you got to do sometimes. But seriously, though, I think that for your parents, even to this point, just even picking up, as I remember the story, for them, it doesn't necessarily mean that, of course, they're agreeing with your decision, that whole thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But just having the ability to hold a space, to have conversations, to understand, not to even say that there's not going to be conflict,
Right.
but to trust that you had, an intention and you were walking in a certain direction. And also, of course, to see the results at some point as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they weren't sure. Like, what is she
Clearly.
doing? Like, I think it wasn't until I was like 28 did they stop asking me about going back to school. But I moved out when I was 17. My mom was in tears helping me pack the car. It was very much of, parents are like, under our roof, our rules. I go, cool, I'll just not be under the roof so I don't disrespect anything here. But I'm really lucky that while they may not agree with my decisions, they've never asked me to be anything other than who I am. It doesn't mean we don't argue about who I am at times, but I'm very grateful for that. And it wasn't until I was a little bit older that I realized that not a lot of kids get that, which is why I try to pay it forward in some of the volunteer work and efforts we have with my other business.
Yeah.
To try to pay that essence forward.
Yeah, that's what I picked up from it. Just, it's a beautiful thing because, of course, being a parent, it's very, you really, as a parent, you have experience and you really feel like you know what's best. But it's also, there needs to be some grace involved to understand that that person has their own soul assignment in a sense.
Yeah.
So to help create conditions. And so I saw a little bit of that in your story. But I want to ask you about, again, you intentionally use the word reset versus a cleanse.
Right.
Why is that?
When I hear cleanse, when I hear detox, I think juice, I think celery juice for like 6 days. I think rapid weight loss. I think something gimmicky. I think it's a promise for something. And I'm sure the origin of those words aren't those things, but it's the way it has been used in marketing. And I even say in the gut reset, if you bought this thinking you're going to lose weight, please email me for a refund. Like, that's not the purpose of it. And it was just really the aversion to, it's like I feel the same way about the word authenticity. It's been used in marketing in such a way that makes my soul cringe. And so a reset is something where you're like being kind to yourself. It's just like, we're just resetting. It's super chill. There wasn't like crazy thought behind it other than like, I don't want to be categorized as those things. This is nutrient density. And it has a fasting mimicking protocol to it. It does have an elimination protocol to it, but it has dense foods that are just, I also don't like the word superfood. What is a superfood? If it makes you feel super, then it's your superfood, but it might make someone else feel like crap. So I talk about nutrient density. And that's, I wanted the education to be around that rather than it potentially being, I don't want it ever to be marketed as like a weight loss program. And I think if I use those words, it would have had the wrong eyes.
Yeah, that's powerful. Like, again, your insights, just witnessing these things is so on the money. This is where everything is going. You tend to be a little ahead of the curve,
I've been pushing gut protocols and a lot of what you see now for 10 years professionally, but been talking about it since I was in the 7th grade. And now it's becoming easier to have these conversations with athletes organizations. Before they'd be like, what? We don't have time for this. We're trying to win championships. And I'm like, but if you validate their sleep score against their recovery time, and now it's I get invited to the conversation versus being the squeaky wheel. Or last month it was just the coolest day. 3 different doctors from 3 different backgrounds all called me to ask me what I thought would support a case they have nutritionally. When before doctors would be like, oh, your food doesn't really affect this. And now doctors want to have those conversations. I almost died in a hospital last year. I think almost a year ago. They gave me some whack medication. And I told them the whole time, I shouldn't have this medication. I shouldn't have this medication. Gave it to me. within seconds they had to give me an anecdote. There's like 6 doctors in the room, and I just remember seeing the tips of my feet as my eyes were rolling to the back of my head, thinking, this is the way to die. I'm like, this is not how I want to go out, man.
Not like this. Not
And
like this.
and after I was stable and they were like watching me, they offered me Oreos. And I'm like, do you see my chart? I have celiac disease. Okay, do you want like a Fig Newton? Celiac disease. And again, I just went through this like massive experience, and I'm still sort of like dry heaving, and I'm like, I'm going to make it my mission to overhaul the food system in the hospital. And there was one doctor in the room who was like, I know that I don't know, and I'm really intrigued by what you know. And so before, there would never be a doctor like that in the room. So I'm really lucky I never bailed on the message in the soul journey, because I could have bailed on this, being like, nobody wants to hear about gut health. I'll just stay in tech. But now it's like, okay, I like stuck through it.
Yeah.
And now it's like, whew, finally.
It's changing, you know.
Takes a long time to get to just the beginning.
Absolutely. Oh, so good. Bar. That was a bar right there.
And here we are.
You know, because I don't think folks realize how difficult it is to change things when the system is just chucking along day to day, you know, in our healthcare system. You know, we know that based on some data from, you know, folks at Harvard, you know, one of the most prestigious, even if you say the name, that the education is not obsolete, but significantly big chunks of it, just within a year or two of the person graduating from medical school, you know, things change so quickly. And so the integration now of food, which would be it just seems Captain Obvious. Once you get it, it's just so obvious.
Yeah.
But just brushing it off as this like non-factor essentially in your health outcomes for years, just because it's not taught. It's not a part of the curriculum.
Right.
Or it's a tiny, maybe 1% portion, even for folks who go to school for gastroenterology.
Right.
You know,
right.
literally the organs dealing with the digestion and assimilation and elimination of food,
Right.
not learning about food except for maybe a couple of weeks tops. You know, so but now, of course, things are shifting because of the state of things. Of course, if you just look at the results,
Right.
how are we doing?
Right.
It's not working out very well. But as you mentioned, you know, more of these terms being on people's minds, like detoxes and cleanses. But I'm so grateful you said this. Marketers really screw things up. I've been saying this for a long time. It's probably 16 years ago now that my mother-in-law constructed the first, like I saw it firsthand with my wife. She was dealing with this particular health issue, and to be able to recover from it, doing this protocol she put together was a cleanse. She called it a cleanse.
Yeah.
And I was just blown away. It really got me into this field at this level.
Okay.
Because I was a strength and conditioning coach, and I had very kind of superficial approaches with nutrition, but I had the moniker of eating real food.
Right.
Like, let's get the best quality, whatever it is, let's get the best quality of that thing. But that really turned me on to how the body already knows what to do.
Right.
You know, and just getting out of the way. And so that cleansing protocol, next thing you know, 10 years later, then it's like, you know, you got your cleanse tea, you've got, you know, this product, that product. Mm-hmm. And like you just mentioned, also authenticity being used as a marketing tool instead of just being authentic, you know? So
instead of just do it.
Yeah, it's just a thing. It's just like breathing.
Right.
You know,
right.
until you frame it in a certain way. But I want to talk to you about a portion of your reset that it's been around a long time, but you're intentionally putting it in here, and it's bone broth. Why bone broth? Why is that a significant portion of the program?
So these things that are trendy right now, I've been parts of cultures forever. Bone broth has been a part of my life since I was a child, and so learning from my mom and my grandmother the healing power of it. Again, it's seeing the anecdotal information and then reverse engineering it with like validating it through science. And I don't like the idea of juice cleanses, because I don't understand how that's going to help repair things in your body. Whereas bone broth, like something as simple as somebody drinking bone broth for 3 or 4 days and seeing their skin quality change. It's like, now when you see your skin change, what do you think is happening? Now, how does that relate to your joints? How does that relate to your sleep quality? What do you think is happening to the lining of your gut? Because your skin is telling you, I like this. So the inside of your body is saying, I like this too. And so I really feel like a lot of people need to have that experience to understand the power of bone broth. Because if I just tell them, oh, it really helps the repair the lining of your gut, I think it's like WT-40 for your joints, they kind of overlook it. It's even bone broth becoming trendy right now. When I see bone broth in the shelving rather than the freezer, I get really sad. I'm like, bone broth shouldn't live with the pasta on the shelf. What is this? Mud water? Like, what is this? And so the first 3 days, it's the bone broth. So you're getting dense nutrients, and then it's also helping absorb a lot of the spices and there's liver in the bone broth. There's dandelion greens in the bone broth. There's nutmeg in the bone broth, and the fat in there and the collagen in there is helping with the absorption and the delivery system and the bioavailability of the power of those other spices as well. It's also giving you energy and all the good stuff. And then moving into the food portion, the bone broth stays in there in lower amounts because I'm trying to form a habit. I want you to be like, I don't need to drink bone broth as a soup. I can just have it as a cup with like my breakfast. So then you can continue that on moving forward. And people will notice the difference in how they feel and their digestion and their skin when they have bone broth. And then they'll notice the change when they cut it out. They're like, oh, I look kind of drab, or I feel some kind of way.
I love that indicator, the skin, because your skin is sort of like the last place to even get the love. So you just know that regeneration is definitely happening with your joints and your ligaments and your gut lining, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things across the board. I know you hear this all the time about people getting on the bone broth protocol, and their skin just starts to glow and reaches a different level of health. And I know you keep your clients confidential, but this reminds me of what happened with basically, extending at a pretty high level Kobe Bryant's career, Dr. Kate Shanahan and her wonderful self as well, getting the Lakers on board and bone broth. So when he would travel, he would find ways to make sure that the hotel that they're staying at, whatever, they're making bone broth.
Yeah. So all my clients, the athletes, especially away games, everything they eat and drink is formulated by me and prepared by me. So away games, they have a freezer bag that has boil bags of their meals, their bone broth, their pregame, their midgame. They're on that. And what's cool is that the athletes that I usually work with are at some great level that the rest of the team and the organization's like, why aren't you eating with us? What are you eating? Oh, that. And then there's that buy-in too, because they see the change in them. And it's people like that really incite that change through an organization. But bone broth travels with all of my clients.
That's awesome. Another thing that I would imagine quite a few folks, not just the people that you work with, but just out here on the streets, period, is Phat Fudge.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Phat Fudge. First of all, what is it? And it's spelled P-H-A-T.
Yeah.
By the way, pretty hot and tempting.
Yeah.
And
do you know the young kids don't know that it means that? They're like, what does fat mean? I'm like, what do you mean? What does fat mean?
Yeah, I mean,
it hurts me. I'm like, oh, am I that old now?
Things changed.
So I used to joke that fat makes you fat. Fat makes you P-H-A-T, to try to get people to not fear eating higher fat. And it's tahini based. It being Middle Eastern, tahini to me, if there is a superfood, would be considered something that's super nutrient dense and it gives us energy. And it was, again, I'm creating something and then I'm listening to the messages and then I'm validating it with science. So I was creating Phat Fudge as a recipe for my clients because I wasn't happy with protein bars. I wasn't happy with goo packets. I needed something that was easy for them to digest and had some vital nutrients. And so I used tahini as the vehicle, the base, and then you'd add different ingredients to it to make these little squeeze packs. And I would make the squeeze packs for my clients and also make little ice cube freezer fudges. And that recipe still to this day is public. And the audience at the time, I think I had like 10,000 followers. They were posting pictures of it in sandwich bags. They were taking it on runs. Mothers were like, I used this during labor and all this stuff. And they're like, you need to turn this into a product. And so I was like, here's the deal. I don't know what I'm doing. I was on Periscope, RIP Periscope. I was on Periscope with like a unicorn head, like making fun of it. I'm like, here's the deal. I don't know what I'm doing. So if you guys want to order, I put 50 orders on the website, 12 packs each. If you want to order that, I'll figure out how to make it into a squeeze pack. In 1 hour, it sold out. Pretty dope. But it wasn't even that it sold out. When I saw who bought it, I was like, I didn't know these people were following me. Oh my God, did I say something stupid today? Oh my gosh. Oh my God. Like, I didn't realize who was like paying attention. And so I hand squeezed 600 packets. I still have the muscle to prove the work from that. That muscle's never going away. It's ketchup bottle over a scale in my house using a vacuum sealer.
You could grab the out of somebody.
And so, get over here. And so I would do that every Monday, 50 orders. And it got to a point where it would sell out in less than a second. And people would email me like, what is this, a Beyonce ticket? I set my calendar reminder. And I'm like, the recipe's still public if you want to make it yourself. And then it got to a point where I was going to have to scale. And again, went to my audience. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to figure out the co-packing world. If you guys want to pre-order it, I don't want to go on Shark Tank. I turned down a Shark Tank invitation, actually. I didn't want to raise funding. I really wanted to do it the old-fashioned way through sales. So if you guys want to pre-order over the next 30 days directly on the site, I promise you in 6 months, you will either have a refund or a product at your doorstep. And in 30 days, over $90,000 in sales on a product that doesn't exist came in. And that's how I was able to initially start the business. I almost lost it again 2 years ago because of manufacturing nightmare, but like that's what started it. And because I had built it from scratch, like wore every hat, when things went sideways a couple of years ago, I was like, I did it before, we'll rebuild it again. And so that was a product that I made for my athletes that I knew was working for them and working for musicians when they're on the road. And then I turned it into a consumer product. And so everything that I make for my athletes, again, protein powders from scratch, protein waffles, the pre-game stuff, the post-game stuff, all of that will eventually become products for the main market. Because I've spent the last 10 years testing it on some of the greatest people in the world versus like being somebody who's like, yo, scientist, I think this is cool. Can you formulate this? It's like, no, this has been actually tested with some championship ring wearing people.
That's
humble
awesome.
brag.
So how would you utilize Phat Fudge if somebody were to partake in the Phat Fudge phenomenon?
I made it as a squeeze pack. Just shoot it. If you are an actual performance athlete, depending on your body comp, 1 to 4 packets pregame of the original cacao, and then taking the power berry, which has cordyceps and beets in it, with the original cacao, mixing that with applesauce as a refuel halftime, and then using the halva one, which is a recovery one, post game. So if you're an athlete, if you're someone like me and you running around, you can interchange them however you want. I love starting the day with it as a squeeze pack. Keeps me satiated for a long period of time when I'm traveling or like before coming on doing an interview like this. Now the audience, the customer base, they do that and then blend it into their coffee, like making lattes with it. They put it in their smoothies. They put it on their brownies or their ice cream to have more fun with it. But my intention was squeeze pack to replace protein bars, but make it your own.
Yeah, that's what I've seen, of course. When I first saw people using it, they were like putting it into stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's so awesome.
I had to learn not to correct. Like, no, they have to
Don't
do it.
do that.
Yeah, I was like, wait, no, it's a squeeze pack. What do you? But it's like, no, they're gonna figure out the best way to fuel themselves. Just paleo.
So good. So first of all, where can people get Phat Fudge, and also your gut reset program too? We got to mention where to actually find those.
Yes, Phat Fudge is phatfudge.com. It has its own Instagram handle. The gut reset's on paleochef.com, and then I'm Paleo Chef across all social platforms.
Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna bring up a little bit of a controversy that took place during the pandemic. There's been a lot of infighting, a lot of divisiveness, but nothing have I seen throughout this campaign was as insightful or inciting of controversy than this tweet that I put out. And I reposted the tweet on Instagram, and
Okay.
it got even more rumbling.
Okay.
I'm going to read it
Okay.
verbatim.
Okay.
I posted, okay, I'm going to say the thing no one else is willing to say. If people had the choice between eating a pear and literally any other fruit, no one would choose that goddamn pear. And man, it went bananas.
I was so offended.
And specifically, you started a campaign, and just went in and, it turned into a whole thing. But people are passionate about pears or their dislike of pears.
Yeah. And I think I went to the store and bought, that's what I forgot to bring. I was going to bring you a basket of pears. I forgot, man. And I did a post I do these ingredient highlights. And so I did an impromptu post on the benefits of pears for your digestive system. Also, they're delicious. Also, have you ever had baked brie with pear on like a croissant?
Some say they're delicious. Others say people would choose anything else. But, of course, I was kidding a little bit. It's because so there's some wonderful pear varieties out there for sure. But for me growing up, the pear is going to be included in some fruit cocktail.
Oh, that's
right?
your experience with pears.
So that was experience growing up. It wasn't until, I got older and my palate was evolved. But I know, for example, Japanese pears were wonderful advent, and I would utilize those in cooking and just snacking, things like that. So many different wonderful varieties. However, me putting that cookie cutter blank statement out, this is the great thing about Twitter. You could throw out a random idea, and but people were passionate. Like, some people were like, I agree, screw pears, and other people were like, are you kidding me? And then people had their certain ways, like it has to be at this exact time on this exact day of the month, and like it got very specific. And I was just like, if you even need to do all that to have a good pear, it doesn't sound like it's that appealing.
I think they're delicious. I like throwing them in smoothies. I like having them with Phat Fudge on them. But it's interesting. You said your experience, how you relate to them is in those little fruit cups.
Yeah.
Whereas growing up in a Mediterranean home, like, it was interesting is I started getting sick in second grade. Second grade is when I started eating more school lunches and not my mom's food at home. That was the shift. So the way I relate to food is what was at home, which was a fresh pear. Or like liver. I love liver. I have an amazing recipe called bangin' liver. It's part of the reset. And I didn't understand why everyone hated liver. And then I realized how they prepare liver here in America. I went to my friend's house. I was like, what? Why is that gray? What is that? But it's how people relate to food. And it's interesting, the American food system. But yeah, pears. I think the pear post is what made us get back in touch. Because you don't remember how we met. Dun, dun, dun.
We've known each other for years, all right?
Yes.
But apparently there was a moment in time that I'm going to remember once you tell me.
Yes.
So where was this?
So the thing that I noticed about you first was your energy. And it was such a lifesaver at this moment. We were both at a party in Beverly Hills.
I remember, yes. Oh, wow, yes, I remember.
And I would just moved to LA. So this was like 8 or 9 years ago.
Yeah. Oh.
And I'm like looking around, and nobody in the room is terrible, but I just don't feel like I fit in the room and the vibe and the conversations. And I was just kind of like walking around with my scotch in my hand, and I'm singing to myself, one of these things is not like the other. And then I just see you holding up the wall by yourself with a backpack and some kicks, just like chilling by yourself, biggest smile on your face, and like immediately walk towards each other like, hi, how are you? Oh my God, there's somebody here that's like just feels like different. I don't want to like, not better or worse, just different. And it made me stay there longer because I kept jumping into conversation, be like, no, I want to talk about, no, it's not. And then there's just this person there that I'm like, this is such, you had a glow around you and about you. And it was like in this environment, but not of this environment. And it stood out to me.
That's powerful.
And
I remember that.
Remember that?
Immediately, I remember that because I remember being in that environment and, feeling a little out of place, but also at peace with it and very just observant of the different kind of cascade of human intentions even,
Yeah.
you know, like some people were there. So for me, it was even a new thing to see, like people were trying to see how important you are and
Yeah.
all these different things. And just, you know, I had done at that point, again, like this is where we connect is, of course, is like I've been through real stuff in my life. And so I feel like just such curiosity and openness, but also at the same time, I have an evolved palate to where I know what I am not going to participate in,
Right.
you know? So it is like, you really do create an energy field around you. And, you know, I remember like, it was so refreshing to meet you as well. You know, it's just like, oh, like I saw you,
Yeah.
you know, and I know you saw me.
Yeah.
And yeah, oh man, I remember,
That's
oh,
how we
that's so
met.
powerful. So, but then cut to our pair debate. I'm gonna share a couple of these messages some people posted in the pair thread. All right, so somebody put shout out to Michael Anthony. He wrote, "Pears take a refined tongue." LOL. He put a LOL on there. And Maggie Stewart wrote, "I love pears, but they have to be perfect ripeness." And then I replied to that when I said, "See, pears need all kinds of conditions to be eaten. They have to be perfect ripeness. You have to be stranded alone on a desert island with the choice between eating a pear or eating some of your own thigh meat. See, pears are not an easy sell." All right, somebody wrote, "Pears over banana any day of the week. Pear over any other fruit for me." People had passion about pears.
But you said, you know, pears need a certain condition, but you have to honor that, right? If that's true,
Yep.
I love something that needs a certain condition. If it's just easy.
Come on.
But you know what? Pears that are super ripe are delicious, and pears that are crunchy are delicious. I don't know what y'all are talking about. Pears are yummy.
Now, I don't want this to
What's
go.
your favorite fruit?
My favorite fruit. I'm not a big favorites guy. You know, I appreciate stuff.
Okay.
But if I had my go-to, like what would I normally have a taste for? It would probably be blueberries.
Blueberries,
I
yeah.
love blueberries, but they have to have conditions though.
Oh, okay. So
you know.
blueberries get the pass, but pears don't.
It's just jokes. It's just pear jokes, okay, guys? Grow a pair. Grow a pair of some, you know, some sense of humor. But yeah, like just having a little bit of sweetness, because sometimes it could be, you know, a little bit too tart or too sour.
Yeah.
You know, so I like to have a little hint of sweetness
Okay.
in the blueberry.
So are dates too sweet for you?
Ah, yeah, dates. I've gone on dates with dates. You know, there's been times where I've gone hard with dates. Yeah, I like dates. I really like figs as well.
Oh, yeah, figs.
Like when figs are in season. The darker ones, I really like the darker figs.
Yeah. Yeah. My dessert, my treat for myself, and trust me, I do crush desserts. I don't, but people think I eat this like perfect diet. I'm like, I drink scotch and like make
Right.
chocolate cake, like chill, we're good. But I do love like a treat, putting a Brazil nut in half of a date.
Mm-hmm.
The texture of that particular nut with the date. It's just
There's
joy.
so many things you could do with dates, period. Like I literally did the same thing. I take the pit out, replace it with, you know, an almond or a Brazil nut.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, for sure.
Pistachios and dates wrapped in prosciutto with a little bit of orange zest.
You see, that's paleo chef talking.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you about this, because in the gut reset program, what I really enjoyed was you had so many little insights along the way as you were taking people through the protocol. And one of the things you talked about, and you didn't know this per this recording, the episode that comes out or that came out before this, when everybody's hearing this, was a masterclass on how to improve your digestion without changing your diet.
Without changing your
Yeah,
diet.
so
Ooh.
all the things that are around, because food, obviously, that's the big leverage point.
Right.
But, you know,
I mean, like environment.
yeah, in the episode, we talked about some of this really amazing science regarding how exercise affects your microbiome.
Yep.
And assimilation of nutrients and the like. But one of the tenets there, and I shared some studies around it, was helping to kind of turn on that parasympathetic nervous system before eating, right? And you actually have a 2-minute meditation essentially that you recommend before people have their meal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and I'm guilty of standing and eating versus like stop, some deep breaths, a little bit of gratitude. And it seems cheesy to some people, like, you want me to pray before my meal type of thing, but it's like, no, it's actually telling your body like, okay, we're going to stop. I experienced this yesterday and the day before that. I was going so hard with like meeting after meeting and interview after interview, and I tried to eat on the go, and I could feel my diaphragm not even letting the food move down. It was all stuck, and I'm like, oh, you didn't stop. So I like sat on the floor, did the breathing, really visualized everything kind of relaxing, and then I felt the food move through the system and get to focus on digestion versus focus on like what's happening next, what are we doing next, what decision we're making. And so there's that cue. I posted a video of me chewing, and, and I was like, this is how long you should chew. And so it was a picture of me chewing and like holding my finger up. I'm like, this is the time it should take too, because there's the cueing of relaxing your body, and then there's the chewing of your food thoroughly to kind of help the digestive system get going too.
Digestion starts in the mouth.
Oh yeah.
There's a saying, of course, your stomach doesn't have teeth and that whole thing, but like for real, it's going to take so much pressure off of you. But man, that's so awesome what you just said about like digestion kind of being halted in a sense and not passing through because of not being in your body, and there's peristalsis, but what we're talking about is electricity, the electrical impulses that's moving the process along. That energy can be siphoned to other things, and so this doesn't mean that you can't obviously, again, eat on the go or whatever the case might be, but what are you doing most often, and having that little moment just to get out of that fight or flight, just even if you change your breathing a bit, just like you just said, a moment of gratitude can just help to shift the energy in your body to support that process.
Yeah, people think that when they're working a lot, they're like, I don't get hungry throughout the day. And I go, no, it's not that you don't get hungry, it's that your body is in this one mode and you haven't checked in. And the second you decide to check in, you're going to realize you're starving. And so I think people need to understand those different systems in their body. Or like what I experienced, someone be like, oh, I just have heartburn, I just have indigestion. And it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah. I definitely eat more when I'm not working, because when I'm like working, I'm on a project or whatever, I might fast and, might quote intermittent fast 1 o'clock,
Yeah.
in the afternoon, and I don't really even notice.
Right.
But, 10 a.m. on a Sunday, I'm like, where the brunch at?
Yeah,
it's a whole different ball game.
And I implore people to pay attention to when they're not eating, because there's some benefits to intermittent fasting. Absolutely. I'm an intermittent faster, but there's also where it goes too far and you may not notice it because you're busy working and you're not hungry. Back when I was still in corporate America, I would work way too long before it was time to go to lunch, and I wouldn't be hungry. And my colleague pointed it out. And she was like, you need to eat something. And I'm like, no, I'm fine, I've got energy. She's like, your face doesn't look right, you need to eat something. And I looked in the mirror and I noticed there was like a little bit of paleness, and then I noticed I was actually a little cranky, but I wasn't hungry. I decided to take a walk, had some food, and it was a really cool sensation of feeling the blood come back to my face. And if I didn't have that cue, I would have just like bulldozed through the day. And you don't get to, like you said, your body is so much smarter than your body's telling you what it needs, and we're like overriding it.
That's so true. So you just mentioned one more thing I want to ask you about, even that going for that walk. In the program, you mentioned, especially when people are working to possibly address an issue they're dealing with, or just for their body to reset, to get things recalibrated. This isn't a time necessarily for you to go ham in the gym.
Right.
So maybe we ease off of that pedal a little bit, but also, so it's not that movement is off limits. Of course, we want to make sure that we're moving, but I want to ask you about this. You love to box, right? So you throw hands. All right. It's another thing about Mary. She throws hands.
These knuckles.
How important is it for us to find something that we enjoy doing as far as movement?
You have to find movement that gives you joy. Like I have family members that I can't get bought into certain types of exercise movements, and it can be really heartbreaking. But if you find if you help them find something that they enjoy doing that incorporates movement, they're more likely to stick to it and go towards it. Myself, if all that was available to me was group exercise, I would never, ever attend. Ever. Tennis player. I want to be kind of by myself. So when I would try to force myself into those situations, not only did I not enjoy it, but my body has a resistance to it. So it's finding things I enjoy: boxing, tennis, trail running. And those bring me joy on top of actually helping me with movement and exercise. In the gut reset, though, I do, like you said, recommend just moving, just walking, maybe some light stretching, because you shouldn't be doing boxing unless you are a champion boxer, someone we both know decided to box through the whole reset because this person's a beast. But when people ask me what's the best exercise, it's the same thing with paleo. Like, what are you going to be consistent with? It's going to get you moving, because you can't put me in a CrossFit class and think I'm going to want to stick with that. But if you have me do my boxing one-on-one, my coach has to stop me, like, we're done for the day. And I'm like, oh man, are we?
I love that. And as you mentioned, the last time that I saw a friend of mine, again, world-class boxer, they were mentioning they were about to do your program, and, your name pops up a lot. And, the impact that you're having, so many folks don't necessarily know that somebody that they're looking at on the big screen or watching them on the basketball court or on another playing field, these are your clients.
Yeah.
And, it's really remarkable, your story, and being able to turn your adversity into gifts for other people. Like, it doesn't get any better than that. And, you're just an amazing person.
I appreciate it. It was really important to me when building this, like even when I met you those years ago, is that I didn't want my work to be about who I work with. I wanted it to be about the work. And my business on the consulting side is referral only. And it's as such because these clients will come to my social media and be like, she talks about the work, she doesn't talk about her clients, and I feel safe. So it allows me to really focus on the quality of my work and build this credibility over 10 years where my name does get mentioned, and I'm still always very humbled by it. And I had a client say, at a dinner, I want to introduce you guys to the well-known Mary. And I'm like, I'm not well-known. And he's like, you're not well-known, but the well-known know you and your work. And I really loved how that was put, because it allows me to, moving forward, still continue on the quality of the work, and then just be really proud of seeing them on the screen or seeing them on the field. Now, it gets dicey when they're on opposite teams. I'm like, shoot. It's a win-win no matter what, but one's going to need some brownies after this. The other one.
Well, again, I appreciate you so much. You're amazing. And if you could let everybody know, because regardless, people can glean so much from you just following your work. And you've got so many great resources out there for folks, from the reset to Phat Fudge. Can you let everybody know where to follow you, and also the places they can find Phat Fudge and the reset one more time?
So paleochef.com is my website, but most of my stuff gets shared on Instagram more so than the website. And stories are the most current. I don't always post directly to my feed. Read the captions.
Yeah,
do people still read captions? Read captions. And because I put a lot of information of what I'm doing with athletes and highlights of ingredients there, and I feel like sometimes that gets missed because they're just looking at the fun picture. Phat Fudge on the website, phatfudge.com. Gut Resets on paleochef.com, and then you can find Phat Fudge in some retail locations as well, like Erewhon and places like health food stores and some climbing stores like that. I think that's it for as far as where to find me.
Awesome. Yeah, I was gonna say, I see the Phat Fudge out there in the streets and stores as well.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's been, this last year has been really cool seeing it really expand, seeing it in locker rooms too. It's been really cool. Like, I did that. Like I have this moment we were talking about earlier where it's like this moment where it's like very much, of course, you've done the work, of course, but then also the moment of like, and I hope I always have a little bit of that awe with it. I don't want to go full, of course. It's a nice balance. I feel like your spirit's like that. Like you know who you are, and you're very certain of who you are. Like, you're very proud of the man you become, but there's still this awe about you. It's really special.
Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here.
We are not over fat. We are under muscled. And if we really care about people and we really care about weight, we have to be muscle centric. So this concept that muscle is the largest organ in the body is what muscle centric medicine is all about.